Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to Open Mic here on my YouTube channel. I am your host, John Campea. It's an honor and a privilege to have you guys joining me here today. You know, every morning on the John Campea Show, we save a few minutes for live questions, but here on Open Mic, that's all we do is take live, open format questions. You know, I've been getting a little bit caught up on Westworld finally. You know, I'm thinking Westworld Season 2 is better than Season 1 was. Yeah, I'm liking it a lot more so far. So I'm going to say that. Go into probably Westworld a little bit more another time. But just to say that, yeah, I've been getting caught up on Westworld. I'm actually liking it a little bit more than Season 1, which I was kind of iffy on. All right. Without wasting any more time, let's dive into the topics today. And the first question coming in today comes to us from Caleb Bradford, who writes, are you still doing the solo spoiler discussion? Nope, decided not to do it. It's just, I realized there's really no point because, there's this toxic, cancerous group out there that if anybody tries to talk fairly or even how dare you positively about Solo, then they will organize and they will try to troll and, attack things. And it's like, you know what? They just kill the fun of it. They just kill the fun of it. And that's their job. That's their mission. Their goal is to try to take the fun out of things for other people so they can feel better about their own pathetic selves. And to me, I just went, okay, fine, you win. I mean, if that makes you feel better about your pathetic life, then you win. But yeah, I decided not to do one just because I didn't want, life's too short to be having to put up with pathetic losers like that. So I decided not to do it. Johnny Banks writes, it's nice to see that pretty much everyone liked Alden as Solo. I thought he would get a lot of hate, but I was wrong. Yeah, that's been one of the refreshing things about Solo is that obviously the vast majority of people seem to like Solo. But even amongst the people who don't, there seems to be, even amongst the people who didn't like Solo, this general consensus that, yeah, that Alden kid was pretty good though, Like there are some people coming out saying, yeah, that movie didn't really work for me, but that kid, he was pretty good as Han Solo. It is kind of nice to seeing him getting that kind of response because he does do a very good job playing Han Solo. And I mentioned this on a show earlier today, is that, when you consider how impossible of a situation that was, like you're being asked to step into a movie that nobody wanted, and you're asked to take over a role that nobody wants to see anybody other than the original guy play. That's a tough spot to be in. And he stepped in there and he did a really good job. I'm not handing out any Academy Awards to the kid for it, but he did a really good job. And I think that shows by the fact that most people are enjoying his performance, and even people who didn't quite like the movie are enjoying his performance as well. So I think that speaks a lot about him and about his talent level. So I'm looking forward to seeing what else Alden Ehrenreich does in the near future. Probably won't be another Solo movie because after the box office results of the first one, I don't see Disney doing another one. But hey, that's a topic for another time. Kyle B. writes, Andrew Lincoln, Rick, from Walking Dead, will be leaving the show after season 9. Could you see Andrew Lincoln becoming a movie star after The Walking Dead? It's tough. It is very, very difficult and very, very rare that somebody who starts off as a big TV star can transition into movie star status. I mean, for every one successful big TV star that has made a successful transition to the big screen, there are 50 that didn't. There's a reason that out of all, what's one of the most popular shows of all time is Friends. Friends is one of the most popular shows of all time. Whether you liked it or not, Friends is one of the most popular shows of all time. One of them actually was able to transition into a successful movie career. And with Jennifer Aniston's case, it's debatable about how successful her movie transition was. But out of all of them, one was able to make the transition. Another one of the most popular shows of all time, Seinfeld. None of them made a big successful transition into a movie career. So you look for every Chris Pratt, like from Parks and Rec, for every Chris Pratt, there's like a dozen, 2 dozen, 5 dozen others that just aren't able to make that transition. And it's a really tough thing. And it feels like the bigger the star you are and become identified in that one role, it seems like the harder it is. So look, could Andrew Lincoln make the transition and become a significant film star? It's possible. It's unlikely. And I only say that because of the track record of big television stars trying to make that segue. Because for every I don't know, George Clooney. There's 50 other name a cast member off of Cheers that wasn't Ted Danson. I mean, it's a tough thing to do. I would say it's probably more likely that he's able to join on with another hit show. But again, it's possible because anything is possible. It's just that the track record is, the odds are against him, but we'll have to see what happens. Let's see. Kyle B writes, I think he is an underrated actor. Okay, who are we talking about? Oh, you're talking about Andrew Lincoln. It's hard to say whether he's underrated or not because you only see him play one role. Like, that's even the thing with Alden Ehrenreich. Like, say, look, I think this kid's great because he was magnificent in a bad movie. But even then you had to temper that because you'd like to see him, how well can he adapt to other types of roles? I've never really seen this guy play anything else other than Rick. I've never seen him play anything else other than Rick. So I really can't say how good or bad of an actor he is. So I'm going to abstain from giving input on that. But if you like him, that's awesome. Jonathan C. writes, with the recent box office of Han Solo, do you think the Boba Fett movie will be scrapped? I don't know. I think they got to have some conversations. I think if you're over at Lucasfilm right now, you have to have some conversations. Now, there are a few advantages that they have that Solo face some negatives. For example, one of the top things that I said from day one that they announced a Solo movie was, nobody wants to see Han Solo that's not being played by Harrison Ford. There's just too many people out there saying, wait a second, a Han Solo movie without Harrison Ford? That is not going to be a drawback for Boba Fett. Right? That's not good. But in the prequels, we had that one guy. Nobody cares about that. For the most part, you're not going to have this massive stigmatism coming along with a Boba Fett project where it's like, I don't know, let's say just for argument's sake, we were talking about George Clooney. Let's say George Clooney always played Boba Fett. You know, he is the Boba Fett. We've always seen in the original films his mask came off a lot, and we always saw George Clooney. And now that was a problem that one of the problems, there's several problems, but that was one of the problems that the Solo movie faced. And that's not going to be a problem for a Boba Fett movie. Also, they probably hopefully learned a lesson. They're not going to open Boba Fett on the second week of another massive movie. That would also help. Also, depending on how good or bad Episode 9 is, you know, Solo is coming off of a Last Jedi movie that a lot of people didn't like. That affected it for sure. So you get a lot of these types of things that hopefully won't be problems for Boba Fett. So that's something that they got to think about. They also have to think about, look, a standalone movie going back in time again of an already established character, and it didn't work. They've got to take that in consideration. So here's what I think. I do not think they're going to scrap the Boba Fett idea, but I do think they're going to do some thinking. I do think they're going to do some thinking, then ultimately they'll do it, but I probably think they will probably still do it, again, because there are some big pitfalls that the Solo film had that they probably believe the Boba Fett movie won't have. I'm still not all that interested in a Boba Fett movie. I have never been all that interested in a Boba Fett movie. Attaching James Mangold, the director of Logan, best film of 2017 by far. Okay, that gets my interest. That gets my attention. But really, for the most part, I have never been all that interested in a Boba Fett movie. I'm still not. But of course, I'll be there opening day to see because it's a Star Wars film. But we'll have to see how that all turns out. All right. Hector Jeter writes, Gio, it's Jeter, not Jeter. Yeah, sometimes I say Jeter, sometimes I say Jeter. Now I know it's Jeter. Ben Rayner writes, if you had your way, do you want Tom's Spider-Man in Venom? No. I don't, because judging by the trailer, it feel like a much different tone than Homecoming. Never should the films meet, in my opinion. Well, I mean, you can cross the worlds over, just maybe not in any one particular film. Because you're right, the feel of this Venom trailer and these Venom trailers do feel completely different than Homecoming does. That doesn't mean you can't have the two characters intermatch at some point in the future, maybe, possibly, if and maybe, when's, buts, perhaps. That doesn't mean they can't at some point meet in the future. It just means, like, I feel like in this one particular movie, no. Look, I'll tell you right now, I've been fascinated. I know there are a lot of people who completely hate the idea of a Venom movie without Spider-Man. And I get it. I do. I get it. to me, it's made it all the more intriguing. I'm actually very, very curious to see this. And really, if you even look like at a lethal protector kind of storyline, the Spider-Man presence isn't all that important, really. So I am curious. I'm made even more curious about a Venom movie without Spider-Man than with. Of course, that goes back to something I've been talking a little bit about lately, which is, I'm finding myself as a film fan and as a comic book movie fan yearning for movies that are not connected to larger cinematic universes. The larger cinematic universe thing is just becoming a lazy thing to me. I'm yearning. Don't get me wrong. I like cinematic universes. I like the DCU. I like the MCU. That's great. I just hate what I'm starting to find myself really bitter about, and really feeling more, ticked off about, and find that I'm rejecting is the fact that everything has to be in a shared cinematic universe now. We've gone from never having a cinematic universe to now everything must be in a cinematic universe. And I'm finding that's turning me off, that notion. That anytime there's even the possibility of a new superhero movie, it's got to be tied into one of the shared cinematic universes. And quite honestly, I find that dumb. I find that really, really dumb. I find myself missing the stories of a hero in a world where they are distinctly unique. And they're not in a world with yet 5,000 other superheroes where every 7-Eleven has 8 superheroes hanging around the slushy machine. And there's just something that I'm missing about that. So while I like the MCU and I like the DCU and I like everything that's happening there, I find myself embittered about the idea that now everything has to be shared cinematic universe. And I reject either or reasoning. I just completely reject either or reasoning. I'm much a bigger fan of both and. I'm a much bigger proponent of a both and philosophy as opposed to an either or. When talking about standalone universe hero movies versus cinematic universe hero movies, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both and. And it's turning me off as a fan a little bit that every time a new superhero is mentioned, it's automatically just assumed it's going to be part of a shared cinematic universe, which I'm quite frankly think it's getting kind of lazy and getting a little bit boring. So I love what the MCU is doing. I like what the DCU is doing, but give me some standalone hero movies. So yeah, I would keep Tom Holland out of, and that Spider-Man out of Venom, at least for now. So anyway, that's just the way I kind of look at it. Hector Jeter writes, your rating system should be 0 out of 10 drops of vinegar. Yeah, I reject it. I no longer have rating systems. People have noticed that when I do movie reviews now, I do not give it a score. And some people say, well, John, why don't you give it a score? Well, the reason I don't give things a score is because a score means different things to everybody. And if me giving a score will mean different things to different people, then what's the point of giving it a score? Like, to me, a 7 out of 10 is a solid movie. That's just 3 points away from being perfect. A 7 out of 10 is a solid, good movie, right? So the problem is we live in a 10, 10, 10, 10, 10 culture right now. Everything's got to be, even if you remotely like something, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10. Even if you don't like something, 0, it's a 0, it's a 0. Everything's 10s and 0s to everybody now. So what I found was starting to happen was I would give like a movie that I think is a really solid movie. And I would say, yeah, 7 out of 10 or like 7.5 out of 10. Solid movie. And then inevitably, you guys have heard me talk about this. I get people writing to me, John, why did you hate that movie? Campea hates this movie. Campea says this movie sucks. I'm like, what are you talking about? I give it like a 7 out of 10. Like if 5 is the dividing point between pretty good or bad, and I go all the way up to a 7, that's a solid movie. So the thing is, what's the point of giving a score to something if everybody interprets the scores differently? So I just realized, you know what? I'm not going to let people, there's nothing you can do. People are going to put words in your mouth no matter what. And when you do this stuff online, believe me, read Twitter. People put words in my mouth all the time. So instead of giving them more opportunity to put their words in my mouth, like I give something a 7 out of 10, people write it, Campea hated this. So instead of giving that, I decided that I was just going to stop giving things scores and I was just going to say what I think about the movie. So that's why in my movie reviews, I talk about the good and the bad, and then I go, at the end of my movie reviews, I go, say the bottom line, this movie is this, this, and this on the positive side, this and this on the negative. Overall, it's okay. Or overall, I think it's a really good time. Or overall, I loved it. Or overall, this isn't very good, And I just put it in my own words and don't give scores to things. So that's why I stopped giving scores to movies. Mason Barr writes, you mentioned Tremors recently. All film is subjective. My favorite film of all time. Number 2 I enjoyed. Number 3 was okay. Everything else was trash. Yes, I've seen everything. I really like the first Tremors. I do. I mean, I admit Mason is nowhere in my top 100. It's not in my top 100 films of all time, but it's an enjoyable film. I like Tremors a lot. Not so much all the other offerings from Tremors. I did not buy into the other Tremor stuff nearly as much. But yeah, I got a kick out of that first one. Sure I did. I mean, what's not to get a kick out of that first one? Let's see. Hector Jeter writes, I don't know if you've ever thought of this, but another reason why I love True Lies is that it always seemed to me like it was 3 movies in one. Here's my invitation. I'm not really sure what you mean by that. Like if you're talking like it's a spy thriller, it's an action film, it's a family dramedy. I don't know if you mean it like that or if you mean like the 3 separate acts felt like 3 different films. I'm not really sure. However, for those of you who haven't heard me say this before, True Lies is my all-time favorite action film. I love that movie. All-time favorite action film. Like pure action film. True Lies to me. It's awesome. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Tia Korea, Bill Paxton, Jamie Lee Curtis, Tom Arnold, Eliza Dushku. I mean, it's a great movie. I love that movie so much. I can talk about True Lies all day. Hector follows up with, you mentioned great Ron Howard movies, but never mentioned Parenthood. Did you like that movie? I personally love that movie and the cast lineup. You know what? A lot of people I know really love Parenthood. I'm not one of them. I liked it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not speaking crap on Parenthood at all. I just find that in my circles of friends, I tend to fall on the lower end of the scale as far as how much I like Parenthood. I liked it. Good movie. But it's nowhere near as good to me as a lot of his other films. And there's a lot of Ron Howard films I absolutely love. Parenthood's a good one. But yeah, if you're asking me my opinion personally, it ranks a little bit lower on the scale than most of his other films. Again, that's just to me personally. If you love it, that's great. A lot of my friends love it as well. To me, I like it, but it's not something that I, watch every 2 or 3 years, if you know what I'm saying. Okay, let's move on here. Kalub Lawrence writes, I recently watched The Greatest Showman with a friend. She ended up hating the movie because there were no LGBT characters. Knowing that all film is subjective, will you consider that a fair criticism? Oh, no, it's an idiotic criticism. It's an idiotic criticism. That doesn't mean she shouldn't like or not like it for her own reasons. But to me, that's like saying, I hate that movie because there's no Italians in it. That's as dumb as saying, I hate that movie because there is Italians in it. Like, I will, rightfully so, give people a hard time who whine and complain about, you put a gay person in that movie? Oh, fuck off. There are gay people in the world. Deal with it. Like, I will give those people a hard time. But to be fair, no, it is not a fair criticism. If it's your own personal opinion, fine. It's fair for you to feel however you feel. But to call it a legit criticism? No. I think it's just as dumb to not like a movie because there's a gay or lesbian character in it as it is to not like a movie because there's not a gay or lesbian character in it. It's a story. It's just as stupid to hate a movie for there being an Italian as much as there is for hating a movie for there not being an Italian in it. Like, I mean, different movies will have different things, like the Freddie Mercury thing, right? Freddie Mercury, his homosexuality was a big part of his life. If you do that movie and don't even hint at it and don't just openly portray that in the movie, then that's a problem. But that's different. The Greatest Showman, like, as far as, gay or lesbian themes or whatever like that, there was no, as far as I know, there were no historical figures that are key central figures to that particular story that were gay or lesbian. So nothing wrong if they wanted to put a gay or lesbian character in it. That's fine. But there's no reason to at the same time. So who cares if they do and who cares if they don't? So no, I reject the idea that they don't have a gay or lesbian character in it, that's not a fair criticism any more than it is for some backwoods swamp cousin humping dude saying, I don't like that movie because there's a gay or lesbian character in it. Neither of those comments to me are a fair criticism. It's totally fair if they make you personally feel a certain way. That's fine. That's you, and for you to figure out how it affects you one way or the other. But I would not call either of them a fair criticism. It's not. To me, it's just not a fair criticism. So anyway, now you can criticize how they portray gay or lesbian characters. I can fairly criticize for how they portray an Italian character in a movie, blah, blah, blah. But I'm not going to criticize a movie for not having an Italian character or for them having an Italian character. I don't think it's fair people to criticize a movie just because they have gay or lesbian characters. Equally, I don't think it's fair to criticize a movie just because they don't. So anyway, that's just kind of how I feel. There, I've made everybody mad at me now. Are you happy? I've equally offended everybody across the board with my one statement. That's just kind of the place that I live in. Anyway, David Alvarado just sends in a super chat. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. Mason Barr writes, decided to start watching Game of Thrones on season 3. It's good, not great, as of where I am. And it makes me want to research Lord of the Rings. Been years. Oh my God. Well, yeah, Lord of the Rings. Game of Thrones is great. It's no Lord of the Rings. Now, are you saying you decided to start watching Game of Thrones again and you're picking up at season 3? Or are you saying you're just starting to watch at season 3? Game of Thrones, there are shows out there, absolutely, where you can just start watching at almost any season and catch right in. I would kind of suggest that Game of Thrones is not one of those shows. And I think you're not going to really get the impact of everything in season 3 unless you watch seasons 1 and 2. Now, that doesn't automatically mean you're going to like it. Not at all. But I would probably suggest that Game of Thrones is probably one of those shows where you would each season benefits from having watched the previous seasons. You know what I'm saying? But is Game of Thrones on the same level as Lord of the Rings? No. I'm sure there's some of you who feel it is, and that's great. For me, no way. Not even close. But then again, nothing really is, other than Star Wars. ZOMG Ruler writes, why do people call DCEU man Superman depressing or joyless? I don't know. I mean, I think it's because there is not, gosh, ma'am, let me go get that kitten out of the tree for you. To me, the DCU Superman, you know what the DCU Superman has never done? Was it Superman 2 or 3? I'm completely forgetting now whether it's Superman 2 or 3, where I think it was Superman 3, where you get drunk Superman. Remember, in his costume's all dirty, he's in the bar, hey, and he's drinking and he's drunk all the time. It's like, that's the DCU Superman doesn't do that. I think it's just because, look, I've always loved the portrayal of Superman in the DCEU. I've always liked, particularly in Man of Steel. Because here you are, you've got this guy, and how would he really act? It's a comic book movie, it's a fairy tale, I get it, it's not real, but let's pretend for a second like it was real. How would a man like that, growing up, finding out he's not even from this world, then finding out that he's like finding some connection to his celestial father, and now realizing he's got these powers of the gods, even beyond whatever it is he thought he had, and trying to figure out his place in this world. What does it mean to do the right thing? Because he's got this ironclad commitment to doing the right thing, but what does the right thing always mean? And then thrown into the situation that just as he's becoming who he is, this alien army with powers equal to or greater than your own show up on the world as well. And I mean, I don't know that the Christopher Reeve Superman would have been able to deal with it any better. I'll tell you this much, the Christopher Reeve Superman would have lost. And this General Zod with his army would have destroyed the world. Had it been the Christopher Reeve Superman going, I think we need to step outside, Zod. Like, that's, okay, that's a nice glib line, but it's not something that works today, all right? So, I don't know. They wanted a Superman that's smiley and happy and chirpy, and to me that was just not consistent with what this character was experiencing and how he's discovering himself would have acted. Now, you may have a different opinion on that, and that's totally fine if you do. But to me, I've just never really seen it that way. Let's see. Devontae Brown writes, wow, with one teat, Roseanne really fucked herself. Yep, she did. For those of you who didn't hear, the Roseanne show has now been canceled. ABC pulled it off because Roseanne decided to get on Twitter and tweet out some vile racist comment against somebody she doesn't like. And ABC said, well, you have the freedom to say that, and we have the freedom to hold you accountable to it, and we don't want what this nonsense that you're saying to be reflected on us, so we're separating. We're canceling your show. We're getting rid of you. We don't want to be associated with you. See, freedom of speech goes both ways. You have the freedom to say whatever you want, but other people have the freedom to express whether they want to be associated with what you're saying or not. That's freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is not, I get to say whatever I want, and everybody's just got to shut up and like it. That's not what freedom of speech is. Freedom of speech means you have the right to say and think what you want to say and think, but it also means everybody else has the right to react to what you're saying and thinking the way they want to react to what you're saying and thinking. No one's saying Roseanne doesn't have the right to say what she wants to say. If she wants to say that stuff, she can say that stuff. She has the right to say it. However, I also have the right to think she's an asshole. I have that right. That's part of my freedom of speech. I have the right to think she's an asshole for saying it. And ABC has the right to say, we don't want to be associated with what you're saying. Our freedom of speech to us means we have the right to disassociate ourselves from you if you're going to say that crap. See, freedom of speech goes both ways. People love bringing up freedom of speech when it's only a one-way street, but it's not. Freedom of speech goes both ways. Nobody's censoring Roseanne. Nobody's saying you can't get up and say whatever you want to say. She can say whatever she wants to say. But you and me and everybody else have the right to respond to what she says however we see fit. And ABC decided the way that they saw fit was we don't want to be associated with that. And that's our right. We have a right. Freedom of speech to us means we have a right to not be associated with what you're saying if we don't want to be associated with it. Who I really feel bad for here is that there are lots of people who work on that show. And now they're all losing their gig because their egomaniacal head of that show decided she had too much free time on her hands and decided to hop on Twitter and say some pretty racist, hateful shit. And they pulled the plug on. Bob Iger came out and he affirmed ABC's decision. Bob Iger said it was the right decision. And there you go. So yeah, she really did screw herself. She screwed herself good. And she screwed the people who worked with her on that show. She screwed them over. So, I mean, look, it is what it is. Josh Crichton writes, a prequel story coming for the sci-fi novel, The Existence, that I'm writing with my friend, but I'm writing the prequel story called John's Big Day. Here's a Teague, Vegas. Also, Anne will be in there. I appreciate that, Josh. Murray writes, saw Solo again, second time, and I love it even more. Fun ride, very adventurous. I didn't ask for this film, but I love Star Wars to heart. 4 films in a row, and it's time for us to appreciate what Disney has done. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't like everything that's Star Wars. I mean, I hate The Phantom Menace. I hate Attack of the Clones. I've been talked into recently not hating Revenge of the Sith. I've downgraded Revenge of the Sith to just really not liking. So I hate The Phantom Menace. I hate Attack of the Clones. I really don't like Revenge of the Sith. It's the least offensive of the prequels. I really don't like the Clone Wars TV show. I didn't like the Clone Wars animated movie. There's a couple of seasons of Rebels that I didn't think were all so good. So I certainly don't like everything Star Wars. But I'm still a big Star Wars fan. You don't have to love everything about something to be a fan of that something. But yeah, I love The Force Awakens. I loved Rogue One. I quite liked The Last Jedi, and I really liked Solo. So, yeah, to me it's 4 for 4. To a bunch of other people it's 4 for 4. To some it's 3 out of 4. For some it's 2 out of 4. Whatever. But I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I'm glad you had a good time with it. Let's see. Orange Hand writes, I think the reason villains taunt heroes before killing them has to do with ego. It's not enough to win. They want the heroes to know the villain won. Well, I think that goes back to something that an observation I made about heroes and villains in certain movies and TV shows. The villains often win. They just don't end the game and let the game keep going, and then ultimately the heroes win. Like, for instance, one of the things I pointed out was, like, I see this in almost every movie where the bad guys capture the good guys. But it's like, the good guys are just shooting the bad guys when they see the bad guys. The bad guys, however, aren't just shooting the good guys. They get them surrounded. Instead of just shooting them and finishing them off, they go, drop your weapons. You hold it right there. And they just prolong the story. When the good guys are shooting the bad guys every chance they get, and the bad guys finally corner them, it's like, they don't shoot them. They don't finish them off. They just go, freeze, drop your weapons, and come with us. You know, it's, and allow the heroes to get the drop on them, and then the heroes win the day. So sometimes you get your James Bond thing where the villain describes his evil plan, but I'm talking about even the foot soldiers sometimes. Like, they capture the good guys, and instead of just finishing them off, they go, oh no, we're going to take you prisoner now. It's like, what? Taking prisoner? You were just trying to kill them a minute ago. Why don't you just finish them off? Because now, for whatever the story needs us to take you prisoner. And that is something that a lot of, even some of the best movies do. Even some of the best movies do that. And it drives me crazy every single time. Let's see. Josh Crichton writes, it's going into the events of the existence. Any guess about the main story? Josh, come on, man. We're here to talk about movies, dude. We're not here to talk about your novel, my friend. KW Garrett writes, let's say a miracle happens and the Cavaliers win the NBA final. No chance. No chance. But okay, anyway. Let's say a miracle happens and the Cavaliers win the NBA finals just by sheer willpower of LeBron. Would that put LeBron above Jordan as GOAT? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if even winning this. Look, he's gotten to the NBA finals now 8 years in a row with a bunch of tin cans, usually his teammates. Seriously, out of all 8 years that they've been to the final, once out of the 8 years, and it was one of the Miami Heat teams. Not even the other, not every time they went, just one time that the Miami Heat went to the finals that I legitimately thought Miami was the better team. There was the 1 year that I thought, yeah, Miami's the better team. Other than that, the other 7 times, including this year, that Jordan has gone to the NBA Finals, he was clearly on the worst team. And that's never been more true than this year. Like, you're talking about, you're going in to play against the Golden State Warriors. First of all, you got Klay Thompson, who would be a number 1 superstar on about 18 of other teams in the league. Klay Thompson, I believe, is the single most underrated basketball player in the NBA. That dude is frickin' superhuman. That dude is strictly superhuman. I mean, that dude is so good, it's nuts. Then you got Draymond Green, NBA Defensive Player of the Year. Oh, nothing. He's just an afterthought on this team, and he's the Defensive Player of the Year. Then you got 2 league MVPs. First of all, you've got Kevin Durant, who's probably the best player on the team. And then, oh yeah, Steph Curry, another NBA MVP. Dear God, are you kidding me? Who's gonna beat that team? I was thoroughly impressed that Houston took them as deep as they did. Full marks to Houston. But I mean, my God, come on. It's just, I mean, Golden State was already the best team in the league, and then they added another MVP in Kevin Durant. It just became stupid at that point. At that point, it's just stupid. Like, this isn't even like when LeBron and Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh got together, because aside from LeBron, Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh were maybe both top 15 players in the league, but you're talking about Defensive Player of the Year, 2 MVPs, oh, and a guy who's probably the most underrated player in the league. And then you got a bunch of other super talented players around them. Against what? LeBron James and the Bad News Bears. I mean, it's preposterously ridiculous. So to me, it's already full credit that every team he's on for 8 years in a row, even when they're the inferior team, he takes his team to the finals. 8 years in a row, he's done it. That's crazy. Honestly, I don't know. I think we're 3 years away from being able to definitively say Jordan or LeBron. And I think until that day, you have to stay with MJ. I think you still have to stay Michael Jordan. LeBron's still got 3 or 4 more good years in him, and I think we're 3 or 4 more years. So regardless of what happens in this finals, even if LeBron, by some miracle, they win the finals, I don't know, maybe Golden State gets into a bus crash and all 5 starters have broken toes and they can't play. Unless that happens, even if by some miracle they win, I still think it's too early to say LeBron over MJ. I give LeBron a few more years, and then let's have the discussion. I think for now it's still got to be Michael Jordan. Let's see. Jeffrey Podolsky writes, some feel the Fett movie and Rian Johnson trilogy, due to fan divide, should be canceled in wake of Solo. This feels like an overreaction to me. Your thoughts? Oh yeah, it's a massive overreaction. It's completely ignoring the facts. Look, I'm sorry. Long before The Last Jedi ever came out, I said you better temper your expectations about what Solo's going to be because of these issues. Then after The Last Jedi came out, that added another issue. That on top of all that, it was coming off a film that a bunch of people didn't like. In The Last Jedi, a bunch of people liked it, a bunch of people didn't. So that was going to have an impact. On top of the fact that it's a movie nobody asked for, a Han Solo movie without Harrison Ford, blah, 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 all that was in place before. Here's the genius of Disney, all right? Disney, and Kevin Feige does the same thing, and Kevin Feige got this philosophy from Alan Horn. And that is this: do what you think is best. That's Kevin Feige's mantra, and he got that from Alan Horn. Do what you think is best and stick to your game plan. And, like I said about the, first of all, Rian Johnson is a tremendous director. I mean, anybody who watches Looper or Brick and doesn't acknowledge that, I simply don't know how to help you as a film fan. And if you don't like him, fine, you don't like him. But come on, there are movies I don't like where I go, oh, but the director is clearly really skilled. I didn't like the movie overall, but clearly the director is very skilled. I don't know how you watch Brick or Looper and not acknowledge just how good of a director Rian Johnson is. But whatever. Some people like him, some people don't. The important thing here is that Alan Horn really likes him. The important thing here is Disney really likes him. And the important thing here is that Lucasfilm really likes him. And they believe in him as a filmmaker. So everybody can cry to the high heavens all they want. They're going to go with what they believe in. That's what has made them successful in the MCU. That's what's made them successful at Pixar. That's what's made them successful with Star Wars all these years. That's been the formula that's led them to $3 billion films all in a row until Solo. So, whether, again, like somebody brought up earlier, will it make them reassess Boba Fett movie? I think they'll reassess, but I still think they're going to move ahead with it. So that people saying it should be canceled? Nah. Keep going. But if you continue to express, see, that's the thing. The difference between a Disney and like a Warner Brothers is that Disney is not knee-jerk reactionary. Whereas Warner Brothers is, it seems like, and maybe this isn't fair, but it seems like, especially with the DCU, every slight change in the breeze makes Warner Brothers completely react and rearrange. Oh no, let's rearrange everything. Let's do something like every single time. Whereas Disney, and you can see this in Pixar and MCU and in Star Wars, is that no, we have our course. We're going to hit bumps, we're going to hit breezes, but we stay our course. Now, if they continue the course, and if Solo becomes a trend, let's say episode 9 only makes like $900 million. I know it seems ridiculous to say only $900 million, but let's face it, an episode 9 has to join the $1 billion club. It has to. So let's say episode 9 only makes $900 million. Well, now you're starting to see a few films. Now you're starting to see a trend. Solo underperforms. Episode 9 underperforms. Once that happens, once you get a few in a row, then maybe they need to reassess where they're going. Maybe then they need, and if they have any more director drama, maybe then they need to reassess who's leading Lucasfilm. I don't care that George Lucas handpicked Kathleen Kennedy. And a lot of people keep forgetting that. Like a lot of George Lucas worshipers completely forget that George Lucas personally handpicked Kathleen Kennedy to run Lucasfilm. It was his choice and his pick. So if you're going to mad at anybody, get mad at George Lucas, because he's the one who handpicked her to be in that spot. But at any rate, I don't care if George Lucas handpicked her. Like, you guys have heard me talk about this before. Her most important job is making sure they get the right directors and that her and the directors are completely on the same page. And after 4 big director dramas going on, that is my biggest concern with her, is that she is not doing the most important job, and it's leading to some chaos. So I would say this. I think Disney is far too steadfast of a company to blow up their plan because one thing didn't go right. However, episode 9 comes out and does under $1 billion. I mean, I don't know. If it makes $900 million and everybody loves it, they'll probably stay the course. But if episode 9 comes out and is divisive and, makes under $1 billion and all that kind of stuff, and if there's, heaven forbid, if there's any more director drama, then at that point, if you're Disney's leadership, you got to seriously sit down and say, okay, we're not reacting, we're gauging patterns now. It's time to reassess and change direction. I don't believe we're going to see any major changes between now and episode 9 because Disney is not a reactionary company. So I don't believe we're going to see any changes between now and episode 9. So we'll see how episode 9 does. If episode 9 is wonderful and great and does 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, $2 billion at the box office, then it's smooth sailing and they keep going ahead as planned. If there's some division, if there's any more director drama, if it makes under $1 billion, then you've got patterns that will become concerning to the company, and then they have to make some changes. And even I, a Kathleen Kennedy fan, would say, yeah, it's time to make changes. I've loved some NHL coaches. But when once a team starts to consistently lose and everything that the coach is trying isn't working, that doesn't mean they're not a great coach. But for whatever reason, this match isn't working. This coach is not what this team needs right now. You got to let the coach go and bring in new blood. And maybe that'll be the case with Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy. But I'm just saying, I really doubt, it's not impossible, but I really doubt we're going to see any changes between now and episode 9, because unlike some other studios, Disney is not reactionary. So they're going to wait. They're going to be patient. They're going to see what happens with episode 9. And if everything works, great. Then their patience is rewarded. And if it doesn't work, then they got to make changes. It's just the way it is. So we'll have to see how that all kind of turns out. Murray writes, are you friends with Alex Damon? His Star Wars Explained channel is very insightful. I'm not familiar with Alex Damon, to be honest with you. So I have nothing bad nor good to say about the gentleman because I'm not familiar with him, to be honest with you. Murray writes, some of the small negatives of Solo went away second viewing. Can't say the same for The Last Jedi. The way they used Rose's character and Canto Bight scenes really slowed the film down. Oh, I completely agree. Like, I like The Last Jedi, but I will talk to you all day about the problems I had with the film. Like, actually, I remember coming out of the premiere, and my very first tweet was, hey, I really like this film, but the Benicio del Toro character, the Finn character, the Rose character, and this damn casino planet. I mean, all that stuff, none of that worked for me. If it wasn't for the fact that I loved what they did with Luke Skywalker so much, and I loved what they did with Luke, if it wasn't for the fact that I loved Luke Skywalker so much, I might be a little bit more on the fence about The Last Jedi. But I really loved what they did with Luke. And so that pushed it over the edge to me that I quite enjoyed the film. But yeah, I could talk to you all day. And that Canto Bight stuff was terrible. Just in my best Charles Barkley imitation, terrible. It was just terrible. There's just no getting around it. I mean, if you liked it, that's great. I'm not trashing on you if you liked it. But for me, that whole Casino Planet stuff was garbage. Did not like it at all. I didn't like how they used Rose, which is too bad because that's a delightful girl who was playing her. They just didn't write the character well enough. I don't like the way they used Finn, which is too bad because coming out of The Force Awakens, it's a great character. They just dropped the ball in a number of areas. That even though I liked it, prevented me from loving the film. You know what I'm saying? But fortunately, I love the stuff they did with Luke enough that it still made up for it. Dakota Barber. Oops, sorry, had a bit of a jump here. Let me find out where I was. La 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 la. Here we go. Dakota Barber writes, let's see here. Saw Infinity War for the 4th time today. Still so great. And Thanos. Okay, but Why did I lose it? There it is. Saw Infinity War for the fourth time today. Still great, and Thanos is still my favorite part of the movie. What a great character. Yeah, the more and more I think about it, while Heath Ledger's performance as the Joker, I think is still the greatest performance in any comic book movie, hero or villain. Heath Ledger's portrayal of the Joker is still the best performance in a comic book movie. That being said, Thanos is the best character. Character villain. I think I've ever seen in a comic book movie. I don't think there's ever been a better written, better villain character than Thanos in Infinity War. And I think he is probably my favorite part of that movie. And again, Infinity War isn't in my top 3 favorite MCU films, but it's certainly up there. I really, really enjoy that movie a hell of a lot. I've seen it. I've still only seen it 3 times. I need to go back to see it a 4th time. But yeah, the more I think about it, the more and more I think Thanos is probably the best villain character we've ever had. ZOMG Ruler writes, when atching Justice League, you probably meant watching. When watching Justice League, a lady said it looked like Affleck didn't want to be there. Isn't that a bit presumptuous? In my opinion, Affleck was better in Justice League than Daredevil. I'll disagree with you, because you guys know me and the Ben Affleck thing. Ben Affleck should be running the DCEU. As far as I'm concerned, Ben Affleck should be directing whichever movie he chooses to direct. He should be allowed to write whatever movie he wants to write and star in as the Batman. I think the Batman he gave us in Batman vs. Superman is simply the best on-screen Batman we've ever had. I'm not saying Ben Affleck is the best actor to ever play Batman. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the Batman they gave us in Batman vs. Superman, to me, is the best Batman we've ever had. Something changed in Justice League. And I found myself getting irritated with that Batman. The Batman who, well, I knew you didn't bring me back because you liked me. Oh, I don't not like you. Like, what? What? You know, one of the best things about Batman in Batman vs. Superman that they really understood and that Ben Affleck really tapped into was the fact that Batman was his true face and Bruce Wayne was the disguise. Batman was who he truly is. Bruce Wayne was the disguise. And they completely abandoned that in Justice. Now, I still like Justice League. I had fun with that movie. I went to go see it like 7 or 8 times in theaters. I had a lot of fun with Justice League. But one of the things they really shit was the fact that they totally flipped the script on Batman. Suddenly, now Bruce Wayne's just this happy-go-lucky guy who, hey, when I need to, I put on this mask and I go and fight some crime. And he became a caricature of the Batman we had in Batman vs. Superman. For whatever reason. So I totally respect your opinion on this, ZMG Ruler. If you liked him a lot in Justice League, that's great. I personally thought he was better in Daredevil than he was in Justice League. I thought he was better in Batman vs. Superman, but not better in Justice League. I had a real problem with their changing of philosophy and what they wanted Batman to be. And yeah, there's a lot about the movie I like, but what they did with the Batman character, not so much. I really prefer the Batman character they and Ben Affleck gave us in Batman vs. Superman. Let's see. But that's just my opinion. You can think totally differently. That's fine. Luke1234 writes, with costumes becoming nanotech, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Black Panther, does that take away from the specialness of hero suiting up? A little bit. I'm getting, quite frankly, kind of bored. You know what it is? It's lazy. It's like, how do we get him into the suit? Let's just say that it's in his fingernail and it can come out of his fingernail and cover. So it's always with him. And yeah, getting bored of it. To be quite frank with you, I'm getting bored of it. Like everything's like, oh, his entire costume is in this thimble. Stupid. And they're changing it from science and science fiction into pure magic. They're making it magic. And it just bothers me a bit, I guess. Ben Rayner writes, in Solo, they set up Solo 2 so perfectly. I want to see that movie. I do too. I thought Solo was a great standalone movie that opened up a door beautifully for a sequel or for a path for sequels. But at an $83 million opening, I mean, hey, Disney might just be really, just go, nope, we believe in what our Solo 2 was going to be, so much so that we're going to do it anyway. Okay, that's possible. But I can't see Bob Iger agreeing to that. Not with Solo costing probably $300 million to make when you take all the reshoots into account. I can't see Bob Iger greenlighting that. It would seem a pretty questionable decision. As much as I would love to see the next one, even I got to say, that would be a pretty questionable decision. So, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Xavier Gomez writes, Andrew Lincoln is reportedly leaving The Walking Dead after season 9. Not too sure it can continue without Rick Grimes. I'm not a huge Walking Dead fan. I'm not sure that show was going to last much. I mean, if I felt like every week that I was looking in Variety, I was reading about how new ratings lows for Walking Dead, new ratings lows for Walking Dead, new ratings, like seemed like week after week after week for the last couple of seasons. It feels like the constant news story was the consistent decline of viewership for Walking Dead. So I don't know that this show is going to go past season 9 anyway. But in hell, how many shows make it to season 9? Very, very few. This is a win. Walking Dead is a clear win. But it might have been time for them to wrap it up anyway. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Darth Impact writes, hey, John, I just found out that Ewan McGregor is the nephew of Wedge Antilles himself, Dennis Lawson. Yeah, we talked about that all the time, man. We've been talking about that for years. So those of you who don't know, actor Dennis Lawson, who plays Wedge Antilles in all 3 of the original Star Wars films, Ewan McGregor is actually his nephew. He's actually his nephew. So there's a little bit of family relation there. Joshua Stevens writes, I feel like I haven't seen much marketing for Upgrade. Really looking forward to seeing it. Yeah, Upgrade looks great, but it also looks low budget. And what that often means is that the people putting it out may not have a lot of money to market the film. So they might be marketing it just as much as they can. The movie looks great. If you haven't seen it yet, look up the Red Band trailer version for Upgrade that's on YouTube. Just look, Upgrade trailer Red Band, and sit back and enjoy, because it looks like total mayhem. It looks amazing. I can't wait to watch. You know, there's a couple of little films like that I'm really excited about seeing. One is this one, Upgrade. The other one is Hotel Artemis, the one with Jodie Foster and Dave Bautista and a bunch of other people. Anyway, that looks, I'm getting really, really interested in that film. I'm really quite excited to see that one too. Let's see. Maurice Cook writes, John, what happened to the Robotech movie? There never was a Robotech movie. There were people talking about doing a Robotech movie. There will be people talking about doing a Robotech movie for years and years and years and years. They could never, number one, it's always been a rights fight. There's been fighting over the rights. Number two, then you try to figure out what's really the marketability of this thing. Number three, how much money is it going to cost and who can raise that kind of money to make that kind of a movie. And so it just never got the ground. Robotech is just like 1,000 other movies. Like for every one movie you see make it to the big screen, there are 100 other ones that got greenlit in some sort of stage of process and then just never made it. Never made it to production. And so when you ask what happened to the Robotech movie, nothing. There never was a Robotech movie. I mean, that's just kind of it. People talked about doing it. People said, we're going to do it. And then other people, another year or later, would say, we're going to do it. And just never happened. Alan Gonzalez writes, how come in the movies is not special to have a lot of heroes with superpowers? Let me read this again, Alan. How come in the movies is not special to have a lot of heroes with superpowers, but in the comics is okay? I'll be honest with you, Alan, I have no idea what you're asking there. How come in the movies is not special to have a lot of heroes with superpowers, but in the comics is okay? Yeah, I'm sorry, Alan, the way you worded that, I'm not trying, I don't mean to skip over your question, but I don't know what it is you're asking, to be honest with you. Terry Canu writes, Infinity War about to hit 2 billion. Hope it passes The Force Awakens. I don't think it will. It's going to probably later this week or just a little bit after that. It's going to hit the $2 billion mark. I don't think it's going to catch The Force Awakens. It could. It might. But I think it's just barely going to get over that $200 million mark. And then it needs to make another $66 million on top of that. I think, before I thought, yeah, it's got a real good chance of catching The Force Awakens. I don't think it will now. I don't think Infinity War is going to catch Star Wars The Force Awakens, to be honest with you. Flick Talk writes, thoughts on Boba v. Maul? I'm not even going to address that question because it gets into too much potential spoiler territory. Warrington Trainspotter writes, another actor that may struggle from TV to movies, Mark Harmon from NCIS. Yeah, he did a couple of little movies, but he never was able to break out as a big TV star. So that could be one as well, yep. That's probably a good example of one. Nathan DC Marvel X writes, what happened to Star Wars Talk on YouTube? I canceled Star Wars Talk on YouTube because the Star Wars online fan community has just become a toxic, cancerous, awful place where people think it's cool to attack other people for liking what they don't like. So I decided to pull the plug on it. And then after I canceled it, some of my Patreon supporters said, well, hey, if you're just canceling it anyway, why don't we do the show just on the Patreon Facebook group? That way we can still all talk about Star Wars and we don't have to worry about any of the toxic, cancerous people out there. I went, oh, actually, that's not a bad idea. So actually, earlier today, we did our first episode of Star Wars Talk Tuesday again, exclusively on the Patreon Facebook group. So that's where Star Wars Talk lives now. It's no longer on the YouTube channel because quite frankly, I've given up on the Star Wars online fandom. It's just become too toxic of a place. And the real sad thing is, it's just something I didn't think would happen to the Star Wars fan community. I saw it happen in the Marvel versus DC fan community, but I didn't think it would happen in the Star Wars fan community. And it did. So I said, you know what? I don't want to have anything to do with it. So you guys think it's cool to attack other people for having a different opinion than you. That's fine. There used to be a day where people could like or dislike the prequels, but they were still unified Star Wars fans together, even though they thought each other was crazy for liking or not liking the prequels. Today, it's like, if you say, I like this, then the weak-minded little inbred, fifth generation inbred losers go, oh my gosh, I didn't like this movie and you're saying you liked it. Therefore, that invalidates my opinion. I have to attack you. I mean, that's what they are. Then they make up these things that they can never back up. And they throw out these fantasies and they gather together around them other toxic, cancerous people who also want to believe in those fantasies. And even though, they don't really believe it. That's the funny thing is they don't really believe it. They're not that stupid to actually believe the shit they're saying. But by saying it, they get to feel like they're validating their own point of view. And I just decided I just don't want to feed into it anymore. I don't want to be a part of it anymore. So I just pulled the show off of YouTube. Steve G454 writes, hey John, thoughts on Spawn reboot and Jamie Foxx casting? I think it's a mistake. I don't think it's a good idea to do it. Jamie Foxx is a terrific talent, so he's going to take whatever you give him and he's going to make it the best it can be. But as long as you got McFarlane in charge, I really don't see a lot of hope for it. I mean, I'll give it a shot. I'll give it a shot, just like I gave Power Rangers a shot. I thought Power Rangers was going to be a dumb idea, and then I went to go see it, and I was like, you know what, I kind of like this movie. I think this is a stupid idea. I really do. I think it has no hope of being any good. But I'll check my expectations at the door when the movie comes out, and I'll check it out. But as long as McFarlane's in charge, I really don't have a lot of faith in it. Matthew Pratt writes, have you got any I know it sucks, but I love it movies? For me, it's The Phantom with Billy Zane and purple spandex and awful acting all the way around. Cool as Ice, Vanilla Ice. It's awful. I love watching it, though. I love getting groups of people together who have never watched it for a movie night to watch Cool as Ice starring Vanilla Ice. It's one of the best experiences of a truly awful movie that you'll ever watch. Some people say The Room is the best bad movie ever made. Not true. Cool as Ice starring Vanilla Ice is the best bad movie ever made. That's my opinion at any rate. Let's see. Ben Lorenowitz writes, tonight, Infinity War, 6 times, Solo, 2nd time. That's a good double feature, man. That's a good time at the theater. Envy is a really good choice. Aaron Wright writes, do you think they'll ever release... Oh, geez, we're almost out of time here. Do you think they'll ever release scenes from Lord Miller's versions of Solo? I'm interested in seeing what it's like. No, they never will, because Lord Miller was not making the movie that they agreed to make. They basically threw out Lawrence Kasdan's script, the guy who wrote Empire Strikes Back, and they were just doing their own thing, which totally pissed off Lawrence Kasdan. So no, they have scrapped that stuff. They are never going to release that stuff, ever, 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 ever. Let's see. Folsom53 writes, production today started on Maleficent 2. Speaking of movies nobody asked for. Yeah, no kidding. You know what? Angelina Jolie was great in Maleficent. She was great in that movie, but the movie wasn't very good. That's the problem. Is that, I mean, it was just a bad movie. And I have absolutely zero desire to see another one. Again, Angelina Jolie was great in it, but it's a bad movie. And why they're doing another one is completely beyond me. Especially when they're on a roll of putting out some good live action remakes to their fairy tale stuff. Whether it's Cinderella or Jungle Book, and they got Lion King coming out. I mean, why would you risk your momentum by putting out a sequel to a bad movie like Maleficent? I don't understand, but hey, that's what they're doing, and maybe it'll be good. Maybe it'll be a lot better than the first one. We'll have to wait and see. Luna Comics writes, saw Deadpool 2. I like the movie and love the end credits, except the last part of the end credits. Not 100% sure of what you're talking about, but I absolutely love the end credits, all of it, including the last part of the end credits. I absolutely love the end part of the last credits as well. All right, guys, last question of the day. For all of you guys, because my voice is going on me right now. We've gone over an hour. For those of you who have sent in live questions that I don't have time to get around to, don't worry. I'm going to take them, and they're going to be in tomorrow morning's companion video. So trust me, they're going to be there. All right, last question of the day. Mason Barr writes, earlier I mentioned starting watching Game of Thrones meant for the first time, not starting on season 3. Oh, so you've watched from season 1 up to season 3. I see what you're saying. Okay, well, totally. Then you're doing it the right way. You're doing it the right way. I'll be honest with you. I like Game of Thrones until season 4. Season 4 is where I started to love it. Season 1 through 3 are okay. I like them. I kept watching the show. But season 4 is where I really started to like it a lot. So who knows? Maybe you'll have the same experience. Maybe you'll have a different experience from me. All right, guys, that will do it for today's installment of Open Mic. Thank you so much for being here, guys. I appreciate it. Don't forget, tomorrow morning, first thing in the morning, we've got our companion video. Then at 8:30 a.m., we've got the John Campea Show, our main movie news show. I'm going to be joined tomorrow morning by Jason Inman, who's going to be joining me for the movie news feed part of the show. Make sure you come back and join me for that. That'll do it for me, guys. Thanks so much for being here. My name's John Campea, and until our next video, bye-bye.